Right now, as you watch this video, there's an invisible force shaping every thought in your mind. It's deciding what you want, what you fear, and what you believe is possible. You think you're free, but what if I told you that your entire reality has been carefully programmed? That every desire, every insecurity, every limitation you feel was deliberately installed into your consciousness. The ancient Gnostics warned us about entities they called the Archons, cosmic parasites that feed on human consciousness. But here's what they didn't tell you. These aren't mystical beings from another dimension. They're psychological structures, invisible algorithms running inside your mind right now. And once you see how they operate, you can never unsee it. Let me start with a question that will disturb you. When was the last time you had a truly original thought? Think about it. Most people go through their entire lives without realizing they're operating on autopilot. You wake up feeling anxiety about things you didn't consciously choose to worry about. You desire things you never deliberately decided to want. You avoid risks based on fears that were never yours to begin with. This isn't philosophical speculation. This is the architecture of control, and it's been refined over thousands of years. The concept of Archons comes from Gnostic texts discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt. These ancient manuscripts described reality in a way that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. According to these texts, Archons are inorganic beings that exist in the boundaries of human perception, not as physical entities, but as parasitic thought forms that hijack consciousness. But let's translate this into modern terms. What the Gnostics called Archons, we now recognize as conditioned thought patterns, societal programming, and psychological control mechanisms that operate below the threshold of awareness. Here's how the mind cage actually works. Layer 1, the narrative implantation. From the moment you're born, stories are implanted into your subconscious. You're not just taught what to think, you're taught HOW to think. The structure of your reasoning itself is predetermined. You're told that success means a certain lifestyle, that happiness requires specific achievements, that your worth depends on external validation. These aren't natural conclusions you arrived at through experience. They're programs installed before you developed the critical thinking to question them. Every advertisement, every movie, every casual conversation reinforces these narratives. The repetition isn't accidental, it's a programming technique. Repeat something enough times, and it becomes invisible. It becomes just the way things are. Layer 2, the emotional frequency lock. The Archonic system doesn't just control your thoughts, it controls your emotional frequency. Fear, anxiety, shame, and inadequacy aren't just feelings you experience randomly, they're tools of containment. Notice how the world seems designed to keep you in specific emotional states. Financial systems that create perpetual scarcity. Social media algorithms that trigger comparison and inadequacy. News cycles that manufacture outrage and helplessness. This isn't conspiracy, it's emergent control. These systems evolved to harvest human attention and energy, and they've become extraordinarily efficient at it. When you're trapped in survival mode, in constant fear about money, status, or security, you can't access higher cognitive functions. You can't question the system because you're too busy trying to survive within it. This is the frequency lock. You're kept vibrating at a level where genuine freedom becomes inconceivable. Layer 3, the identity prison. The most sophisticated cage isn't around your body, it's around your sense of self. You've been convinced that you are your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, your social roles. You identify so completely with the programmed self that you defend it as if your life depends on it. This is the masterstroke of the Archonic system. You become the guard of your own prison. You police your own thoughts, limiting yourself to what feels realistic or appropriate. You dismiss possibilities that fall outside your programmed identity as impossible or foolish. Now let's get specific about how this programming operates in your daily life. You don't want most of the things you think you want. Your desires have been engineered. The fashion industry doesn't respond to what people want. It creates desire through artificial scarcity and social signaling. The technology sector doesn't fulfill needs. It manufactures dependencies. Look at your own life. How many things do you own that you absolutely needed versus things you were convinced you needed? How many goals are you pursuing because you genuinely want them versus because you've been told they represent success? The Archonic mind cage operates through desire manipulation. Keep people chasing external goals, and they'll never turn inward to discover their actual power. There's a reason independent thinking is so rare. From childhood, you're rewarded for conformity and punished for deviation. The education system doesn't teach you to think, it teaches you to memorize approved answers. The social structure doesn't value authentic expression, it values fitting in. This creates what's called the consensus trance. Reality becomes what the majority agrees upon. Question that consensus, and you're labeled problematic, crazy, or dangerous. This peer pressure isn't enforced by authorities. It's enforced by everyone around you who's also trapped in the program. The genius of this system is that most people will defend their programming because they'd mistaken it for their own identity. Challenge someone's belief system, and they react as if you're attacking them personally. Why? Because they can't distinguish between the program and themselves. Entertainment, social media, news cycles, celebrity culture. These aren't just pastimes, they're sophisticated attention traps designed to prevent you from ever sitting with yourself long enough to question reality. The average person now consumes content for over 10 hours per day. Think about that. More than half of waking life is spent absorbing information that was curated by algorithms designed to maximize engagement, not enlightenment. Every moment spent scrolling is a moment not spent in self-reflection. Every hour watching others live their lives is an hour not creating your own. This isn't accidental. A distracted population is a controllable population. How do you know if you're trapped in the Archonic program? Here are the telltale signs. You feel chronically dissatisfied. No matter what you achieve, it's never enough. There's always the next goal, the next purchase, the next achievement that promises fulfillment but never delivers. This isn't ambition, it's the program keeping you on the hedonic treadmill. You experience existential dread, not the profound philosophical kind, but a low-grade anxiety that something is fundamentally wrong with your life, yet you can't identify what. This is your consciousness trying to alert you to the cage. You find yourself defending systems that harm you. You argue for the rationality of debt, the necessity of soul-crushing work, the virtue of sacrifice for systems that would replace you instantly. This is Stockholm Syndrome at a civilizational level. You fear judgment more than failure. You won't pursue what genuinely calls to you because of what others might think. You've internalized the surveillance system so completely that you censor yourself without external prompting. You can't imagine radical alternatives. When someone suggests a completely different way of living or organizing society, your immediate reaction is to explain why it's impossible. You've been trained to police the boundaries of acceptable thought. Time feels like it's accelerating, but you're not growing. Years pass in a blur. You're busy constantly, but can't remember what you accomplished. You're moving through life on autopilot, responding to stimuli rather than consciously creating. Breaking free from the Archonic mind cage isn't a single moment of enlightenment. It's a progressive deprogramming that happens in stages. Stage 1. Recognition. The first step is simply seeing the cage. Start observing your thoughts as if you're a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Don't judge them, don't identify with them, just watch. Notice when thoughts arise that create limitations. I can't do that because I need to achieve X before I can. People like me don't. These aren't truths. They're program code running in the background. Pay attention to your emotional reactions. When do you feel suddenly anxious, angry, or ashamed? Often these emotions are triggered not by genuine threats, but by programmed responses to situations that challenge your conditioned identity. Stage 2. Questioning everything. Once you see the program running, start interrogating it. Why do you believe what you believe? If you trace any belief back far enough, you'll usually find it was given to you by someone else: parents, teachers, media, culture. This doesn't mean all inherited beliefs are false. It means they need to be examined consciously rather than accepted automatically. You need to rebuild your worldview based on direct experience and genuine reasoning, not borrowed certainty. Ask uncomfortable questions. Why do I work a job I dislike? Why am I pursuing goals that don't excite me? Why do I maintain relationships that drain me? Why do I suppress parts of myself to fit in? The answers will be revealing and probably uncomfortable. Stage 3. Reclaiming attention. Your attention is your most valuable resource, and the Archonic system is designed to capture it. Start taking it back deliberately. Implement digital fasts, not because technology is evil, but because you need to break the conditioning loop. Notice what happens when you go a full day without checking social media or news. You'll experience withdrawal symptoms. That's how you know it has control over you. Create spaces of silence in your life. Meditation isn't about becoming peaceful. It's about observing how the mind operates when it's not being stimulated externally. You'll start seeing thoughts as events that happen rather than truths that define you. Curate your information diet as carefully as you curate your food. Every piece of content you consume is programming. Choose consciously rather than consuming passively. Stage 4. Reality testing. The program maintains power through certainty, convincing you that you know how things are and what's possible. Start running experiments that challenge these certainties. Try doing something you've always believed you couldn't do. Not to succeed necessarily, but to test whether the limitation was real or programmed. You'll be surprised how many impossibilities dissolve upon actual contact. Deliberately violate social scripts in small ways. Respond to, "How are you?" with genuine honesty rather than, "Fine, how are you?" Notice how this creates discomfort. That discomfort reveals the invisible rules governing interaction. Expose yourself to radically different worldviews. Not to adopt them necessarily, but to see that reality is far more malleable than you've been led to believe. Stage 5. Authentic creation. Once you've cleared enough programming, something extraordinary happens. You discover what you actually want, independent of conditioning. This is genuine desire, not manufactured want. True creative expression emerges from this space, not creation designed to get approval or achieve status, but expression for its own sake. This is what the system fears most: humans who create from authentic inspiration rather than responding to programmed incentives. Start building a life based on your genuine values rather than inherited ones. This isn't comfortable. Everyone around you who's still in the program will question your choices, often aggressively. Their programming recognizes you as a threat to the consensus trance. Breaking free from obvious programming is just the beginning. The deepest layers of the Archonic system are so subtle they feel like reality itself. You've been taught to experience time as a scarce resource that's running out. This creates perpetual urgency and prevents presence. But what if time isn't what you think it is? The constant feeling of not having enough time is itself a program. It keeps you in future-oriented anxiety, always preparing for life rather than living it. Practice present-moment awareness, not as a relaxation technique, but as a way of escaping the temporal cage. Perhaps the most fundamental piece of Archonic programming is the belief that you are separate from others, from nature, from the universe itself. This separation creates the vulnerability that all other programs exploit. You can be controlled through fear only if you believe you're an isolated entity in a hostile world. You can be manipulated through desire only if you believe you're incomplete and need external things to become whole. Every spiritual tradition points to the same truth. The separate self is an illusion. You're not an isolated consciousness trapped in a body. You're a localized expression of a unified field of awareness. Realizing this experientially, not just intellectually, dissolves the fundamental basis of control. The search for meaning can itself become a cage. You've been conditioned to believe life must have a specific purpose, and if you haven't found it yet, something is wrong with you. This creates an endless seeking that never arrives. But what if meaning isn't something to find, but something you create, moment by moment, through conscious choice? The program wants you searching for externally defined purpose, so you never discover your power to generate meaning through authentic being. Breaking free from the mind cage isn't about reaching some permanent state of enlightenment. It's about developing the skill of recognizing programs as they arise and choosing whether to engage with them. You'll never be completely free of conditioning. You're living in a human body, in a society, with a nervous system shaped by evolution and experience. But you can develop the capacity to see the difference between programmed response and conscious choice. Here's what life looks like when you start operating outside the Archonic program. You become comfortable with uncertainty. Instead of grasping for security and certainty, you develop trust in your capacity to navigate whatever arises. This single shift eliminates most anxiety. You stop seeking permission. You realize that no authority, no matter how impressive, has better access to truth than your own direct experience and reasoning. You become epistemically sovereign. You face fear differently. Fear still arises, but you recognize it as information rather than command. You investigate fear rather than automatically obeying it. You create rather than consume. Your default mode shifts from passive absorption to active expression. You become a generator of culture rather than just a consumer of it. You build genuine relationships. Without the program mediating every interaction, you can actually meet others human to human, not role to role. Connections become real rather than transactional. You discover unshakable peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer at war with what is. You stop arguing with reality and start dancing with it. The Archonic mind cage is real, but not in the way ancient texts described it. It's not mystical entities from another dimension controlling you. It's the accumulated weight of conditioning, the architecture of inherited belief, the momentum of unconscious patterns running on autopilot. Every moment you're aware of the program is a moment you're free from it. Awareness itself is the key that unlocks the cage. The system depends on you remaining unconscious. It requires that you mistake conditioning for nature, programming for reality, the cage for the world itself. The moment you see it clearly, its power begins to dissolve. This isn't about joining some counterculture or adopting a new ideology. Any system that promises to free you if you just follow its rules is another cage. True liberation is taking full responsibility for your own consciousness, questioning everything, including what I've said in this video. The Archons don't want you watching videos like this. They want you distracted, anxious, and convinced that your current limitations are permanent. But you're here, you've watched this far, which means some part of you is already awake and calling you toward freedom. The question isn't whether you can break free. The question is, will you? Your move.